panel discussion, though, we need to ask really quite a blunt question, which is, are people getting the legal services they want and need? And to help us answer that question, we've got three speakers who I think are very well placed to not just answer that, but actually provide some evidence as well. So we're going to look at that issue of consumer segmentation. Who do we mean when we talk about a user of illegal services? To the issue of legal need, and indeed to some stories of unmet legal need, which will be very familiar to many of us in this room. So I'm going to hand over now to Aileen, Tom and Denise. Now, there isn't going to be an opportunity for questions and answers after this session all, but there will be after the next panel. So again, it's a seamless session. So make a note of the questions you want to ask, and I will make sure there's plenty of time to come to you. So thank you, Aileen.
So there you go. Hello, I'm Aileen Armstrong. I'm from one of the regulators. Can you hear me? Is that on there? Is there something that I haven't done? Can you hear me now? Is that coming through? It was on. I've got a green. Shall I try again? Can you hear me now? Do you want me to swap out my mic, or do you want me to hold a mic? Oh, am I on now? Hello. I will go again. I'm Aileen Armstrong from the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And I've got a very short slot to talk to you this morning, but I want to talk to you about our consumer segmentation research that we commissioned last year from Bayes Business School. And I just want to say, you know, this is a tiny slither of, looking at the question of legal need and unmet need. But I think, Dame Claire and other people speaking this morning did mention that one of the roles that we can do as a regulator is do research, add some information, hopefully provide some insights for us all. The first thing to do is to just mention consumer segmentation and what it means. It's obviously a very familiar term in marketing and economics elsewhere, but if it's not familiar to you, what this is really about is just looking at different attributes and behaviours of consumers, seeing if there are different groups of consumers, i.e. different segments of consumers that have, shared attributes, and that can help identify how to meet those particular needs. So it really is all about understanding consumers' wants and needs, and then understanding what can be done to improve and hopefully close the gap on unmet legal needs. So I'm just going to pick out, there's a lot in the research. The report is on our website. I commend it to you. There's detail in there. But I was really going to focus on three key messages from the research. The first one, I would talk a tiny bit more about each of these. The first one is really that communication in providing legal services is absolutely key, regardless really of the subject matter of someone's legal need. Consumers all care about the approachability of their legal service providers, and they really value clear explanations. The second theme that I'm just going to pick out is what we found in terms of how to segment consumers in a way that's going to be useful to give us insights about their attitudes and therefore what we need to do as a legal profession to meet those needs. And the third thing I'm just going to touch on at the end is that we did some testing through this research about different interventions that can really help empower consumers. So I will touch on that too. So the first point, I'm not going to read these out, but we did ask, in terms of what consumers want. We were looking at what they want when they have to choose a legal provider, a legal services provider, and also what they want once they have chosen and are using a legal services advisor. And so what came across really clearly in terms of when choosing was this point about consumers want their legal services providers to be approachable. They need transparent, easily understandable information. And they also want to know that the person has a specialism in the field relevant to them. And they also do look at good performance indicators. So online review tools, etc., can be really important. And when you look at what that means when they make that choice, one of the interesting observations was that cost and lowest cost isn't always what's the highest priority for people. And then when using a provider, again, approachability and communication are really, really important. But I just wanted to pick out another couple of observations. And that's that many consumers actually told us that they prefer an approachable legal advisor who takes the time to explain and help them understand what's going on over a provider of a really speedy service that doesn't actually explain what's going on. So that is crucial. And a second one, just to pick out, and it might seem obvious, but I'm going to call it out anyway. The perceptions of consumers of legal services and the providers of legal services are not the same. And crucially, we had a key finding here where, when we asked providers and they said, yes, our communications are really, really clear, understandable, accessible, no more to do here. Consumers differed. So it is really important to get that feedback and understand. So then just coming on to the segmentation that we were looking at, I mean, a clear takeaway here is that, there isn't one size fits all solution. We're all different as consumers. We will need different things. But we did find distinctive segments in some areas, about people's preferences. So there is still, this was a bit of research that was done online, actually, but you could see these were online savvy consumers who some still preferred face-to-face. So you've got that spread. You also have in different areas people who would prefer a fixed price versus those who are happy to go for an estimate and get tailored services. But one of the really interesting findings here was that the area of law and the demographics of the consumer didn't really have much impact on the preferences that consumers had. So I think, there has been a fallback of kind of segmenting the market in that way. We found that wasn't, really held up by the evidence here. So I've just popped those key messages at the bottom of the slide again, just to reiterate. But really, I'll just take a couple of minutes to cover then the testing that we did about what can actually, improve things. And what we did was we trialed a couple of interventions. The first one was about helping consumers understand and recognize when they've got a legal need, because if you don't know you've got a legal need, how are you going to go and find a solution for it? And we did find a kind of incremental uplift that with legal education, consumers felt more confident, and that did help a bit. But the second intervention that we trialled was really about empowerment, about explaining to people and helping them understand how to search for legal services, how to understand the complaint, what complaints procedure is there, and how to pay for legal services. And we found that had a much, much bigger impact on consumers' willingness and likelihood of then accessing legal services. So that was, a really important element that I think it's important to keep paying attention to. And what that did was that really helped people have their confidence built that they could find a solution. That's a real whistle-stop tour, or as I say, there is much, much more. But in terms of just a few insights that I think hopefully we can all kind of use to think about what steps we can make that will make a difference for consumers going forward. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that mandatory microphone. Can you hear? Fabulous, excellent. Thank you very much, Aileen. We're going to go a little bit further now from wants and needs further into needs. And I'm really pleased to share with you a few key figures from our individual legal needs survey. Now, this is a joint project with the Law Society, and we commissioned YouGov. So this data comes from the second half of last year. There's a lot there, so we're still working through it. We're expecting to publish towards the end of this month a summary report, but it's rich, so there's much, much more to come. But there's a few things that we can pull out and share now with you ahead of publication that we see around legal needs. Now, I could happily spend half a day going through methodology, but I suspect I'll probably lose most of you very sadly. But a few key things. This is quite large, so there's over 17,500 adults based across England and Wales through online responses that fed into this. And there's just three things I just want to flag for your attention. So first off, as a participant, we take you through a list of legal issues. So you don't need to know that you've had a legal issue for us to work out that you've had a legal issue. That's quite important because legal issues don't tend to be presented on a plate with a big label saying legal issue. It's usually part of life and it's wrapped up with other things quite often. Obviously, I haven't put all 34 up here because that would get quite busy, but you get the idea. They're pretty widespread. We're going from parking tickets to probate, from slightly less serious things around defective goods and services, through to the much more serious, but thankfully lower incidence issues such as being arrested or immigration. So we try and go through the whole gamut. The second thing is we apply the OECD framework for estimating legal needs. Again, that could easily be another half day, but there's a set framework that's been tried and tested both here and down in Victoria in Australia, if not elsewhere. And as part of that, it uses measures of legal capability. They're quite important, they're quite interesting, and we'll come on to those shortly. So, who has unmet legal needs? Probably the main headline is, after going through all of this, we see that 36% of people who faced a contentious legal need or legal issue, had a legal need, ended up with an unmet legal need. But let's go back very slightly. What is an unmet legal need and how on earth do I know to be able to tell you? So, first off, you need to have a legal need, which in simple terms is whether the issue you've got, that degree of seriousness, combined with the combination of your awareness, your level of legal confidence, how fair you find the process, whether all those together interacting are enough to overcome that level of seriousness or outweigh it, so it's low enough that you can deal with it on yourself. Because obviously, if you've got a parcel that's late arriving from Amazon, you don't need to get straight through to a lawyer in order to get a resolution. So then, having an unmet need. If you've got a legal need and either you didn't get expert help or needed more help because what you got wasn't adequate or it took too long, then using the modelling, we say that you had an unmet need. Anyway, sort of technical details aside, that's what we're talking about. Now, the big thing is, whilst we see 36% overall for a contentious legal issue, so an issue involving a dispute, more likely to involve a court or tribunal process, those people have an unmet need. And that's running over a 4-year period. So we're looking from 2019 through to 2023. 36% overall, but it doesn't fall equally. So you can see there, we've got a difference between men and women. Women more likely to have an unmet legal need for a contentious issue. Disability as well. So if your day-to-day life is limited a lot by disability, that level's 50% compared to, I was going to say just, but a third for those whose daily living isn't at all limited by disability. And coming back to legal capability. So one measure we have is legal confidence. So that's the confidence or level of confidence that you have when facing a range of legal scenarios, how confident you are that you can reach a fair and positive outcome, okay? Now, if you've got low levels of legal confidence, you can see much higher levels of unmet legal need for contentious issues compared to if you've got a high level of legal confidence. Incidentally, there are other capability measures as well, and you can see on the slides out there that have been running through, you can see some of the responses to the items measuring perceived accessibility or inaccessibility of the civil justice system. And they came from all 17,500 plus respondents from the survey as well. The biggest reason why people have an unmet legal need for a contentious issue is that they didn't get help. Overall, that's 25%, okay, of those with an unmet need. And again, we see those who didn't get help, slightly higher for women compared to men, only 2 or so percentage point difference. But obviously, if you put that across the whole population of those who have a contentious legal issue, you can see that's a big group of women. Again, those limited a lot by disability, much higher than those who aren't at all limited in their day-to-day living. And then legal confidence, again, nearly a third don't get help who've got low legal confidence compared to just under a fifth who've got high levels of legal confidence. And another barrier, it's not as big as perhaps some of the others, is not necessarily cost itself, but the perception of cost, that it will be too expensive. So 13% overall told us that it didn't get help because they assumed it would be too expensive. That's notably higher if you've got low levels of legal confidence compared to if you've got high levels of legal confidence. Right, that is a very quick canter through, and there's much, much more to come. So I hope A, I've whetted your appetite for what's to come, and B, you can see within that overall level of unmet need, how it falls differently, just looking at a few key characteristics. We're going to go from figures now, and I'm going to hand over to Denise, who's going to take us into real life. I was amazed when I hear this, but I won't steal your thunder.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me again. I'm Denise. I run a charity in East London, in Tower Hamlets. Tower Hamlets is a place of tale of two cities, highest levels of child poverty, highest levels of rent in the country, and people really struggle. We can talk about how much you get on universal credit, 27,000, rent is 33,000. So you see people minus £900 a month. So we don't see people on low income, we see people with no income. So I'm here because we connected through this article that was done on my charity last year. I opened a 4th food bank in London back in 2010, and I closed the food bank in 2022. That was always the aim, but it was a shock to everyone else. And the reason why is because food banking does not solve poverty. So I'm going to take in a bit of a journey, tell you about who's in poverty, types of crisis they face, and how through the innovation that we did, we blended advocacy and advice. And so are able to help people so they don't come back to us as success. But poverty's also changed. So I'll take you through the pandemic as well. So I could tell you about the youngest person referred to our service being a 13-year-old. Sorry, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. 13-year-old referred to our service because he went to school and came home and his parents wasn't there. Or a domestic abuse survivor who disclosed to me that her 3-year-old tried to commit suicide. Or I could tell you about someone that walked into our service mentally ill, was not able to get the form WCA 50. All advisors would probably know what that is, which means that you're not capable of work, was asked to demonstrate 40 hours per week worth of job search, and because he couldn't, he was sanctioned for 9 months, 273 days. When he walked into our service, 55 kg weight, and he disclosed to me that throughout 2017, he spent a total of £240 in food. Do the maths, £1 pot noodle every other day. Food poverty or injustice. I'll tell you about Brenda, just really quickly then. Brenda walked into our service, mum of 2 boys. She came to us for food. And we asked her what was wrong. She burst into tears because it was the first time she'd ever been asked after going to food banks what the problem was. It turns out she's awaiting a payment for a benefit that she'd appealed. You know, she'd been turned down. She appealed it and they said, "You've won, we're going to pay you." She'd been waiting 12 years. And what happens after 7 years with documents? So we helped her. We switched the benefits back on. So that's why we provide access to justice. Food banking doesn't work. So we formed a partnership with the Child Poverty Action Group back in 2012, and that set the fire in me about the need for justice as opposed to food banking. The people that we see come from a range of backgrounds, but they are all vulnerable. By the time they come to us, they're vulnerable. So we found that even when you provide advice, if you're not providing that wraparound support, they come back with a bigger problem. So we were the first food bank to integrate advice and wraparound support to help people and lift them out of poverty. We have today a blend of advice and advocacy. Advocacy is where we map the needs of not just the person, but the entire household. Tell us about you. Tell us about your child with special needs. Tell us about mum and dad. Are they getting all the benefits that they're entitled to? Not for a life on benefits, because by the time they come to us, they haven't had income for years. This is just about surviving. So map the needs of the entire household. And then we have an advice team, and they deal with the more complex issues, which is up to first tier tribunal. So we learned that poverty is complex. I did some research yesterday because there's an announcement in the budget about the household support fund been extended, right? It's £800 million per year across the UK, but £19 billion goes unclaimed, of which £7.5 billion is to do with universal credit alone. There's help on offer, but only £800 million has been released by the government to people that are struggling. I'm no longer food banking, but for me, every time someone walks into a food bank and they are not asked about what's going on with them, it's an opportunity missed. So let's talk about the pandemic. So when everyone was fussing around access to food, this is a call that we received. And we have hundreds, if not thousands, of stories like this. Tower Hamlets is one of the most devastated areas when it came to COVID, and we met households where parents passed away, children left, and grandparents had to step up. Poverty is different. So yes, this is one. But this is my final story. So last year, May, I met Barry's son. He came to our service. And the reason why he came was because his tenancy had problems with his tenancy because his mum passed away. That didn't belong to him. He was trying to secure his housing. And so he came along and he disclosed in that first meeting that this is the 5th time that he'd left home in 15 years. So he came to us for help. He mapped his needs, that of his family, and he disclosed that his dad had a problem. So Barry's kind of worked for a long time as a lorry driver, 73 years old, paid into the system, and now has a range of illnesses for which he needs to apply for attendance allowance. By the time we saw him, he'd applied 5 times and been declined. Within 5 weeks, it's in payment because we helped him. But we looked at the wider needs, and he wanted to live independently. He needed a mobility scooter and everything else. And so he set about doing all of that and all the other things that he needed. And by the time we got around to securing the mobility scooter, we applied to charities and raised the funds. It was due to be delivered in mid-November. And he's really happy because for all this time, he's gone without the help. And this crazy bunch of people in Tower Hamlets are going to help me. And so we rang him up and said, it's ready next week. And then he dies. And it really is as simple as that. Poverty maims, it kills, it destroys. And in all the time, that 14 years, I've never seen it this bad. So my team and I, we don't give up hope. Every week, there's always a story that blows us away, but we keep going. And what I'm really proud about for building this team is that we have found a way to uniquely connect with people that come to see us really quickly, mapping those needs and providing that holistic support. The tribunal part of our work, my team tells me that bundles are like 400 pages long. We're not funded for it. And if I said to you, because I think it's a point that came up a little bit earlier, half of our cases, clients drop away because they find the legal system intimidating. So we're now thinking about how can we build in kind of more emotional support to say, you can do it because you've got a case. But this is kind of what we're sitting in Tower Hamlets doing and developing, looking at ways that we can, enhance what it is that we do to ensure people are able to get justice. But we're still building our model, still developing it to make it more efficient. And we're now being commissioned to train organizations to work in this way because it's really expensive to run a food bank now. It's not working. But I'm very humbled and very honored to be here because I've already been inspired by my friend from the Southwest Law Centres about how we could expand what it is that we do by adding paralegals. I think there's space for innovation. And I think that no matter what, we need to not stop trying to ensure that people are able to gain access to justice. But thank you, it's my final word.
Thank you.